Weekend Spectator. My name is Grace Riley, and I'm here with Paul Kengor. We're going to be breaking down some of the pretty iconic moments of RFK's speech that was called maybe one of the best political speeches in a long time. Something, again, that was unifying, really interesting, coming from RFK, endorsing Donald Trump. And he brought up a lot of really interesting points and topics. And Paul Kengor wrote a piece on this for the American Spectator that's worth checking out. So we're excited to have you with us this week.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Good
Yeah,
to be with you again, Grace.
yeah, no, it's always good, always a lot of fun. And with RFK, we know that this happened kind of a few weeks ago, but the reason that we wanted to talk about it was because the points that he brought up were really significant and really still stand and are worth discussing further. His speech made a lot of people mad on the left, but also it was really eye-opening. I really enjoyed watching his speech. I especially enjoyed hearing the things that he brought up about health and about the health crisis. And it was really interesting to hear from him as he presented this really vulnerable perspective and story of how he did work so hard and does care so genuinely about our country. And that's why he was doing what he was doing. But that he actually ended up facing significant attacks from the left and the lefter who completely suppressed his campaign, blocked him from doing anything, legally challenged him everywhere he went with everything that he tried to do, and how that was kind of something that was shocking to him that it was the Democrats that completely pummeled him and came at him and wouldn't let him succeed in what he was doing. And then he went and found common ground with Trump, which he wasn't expecting to do. Krenger, you wrote a piece about this. Do you want to tell viewers a bit about the piece that you wrote?
Yeah. So I open with a quote from RFK Sr., right, who said, "What my father said about businessmen also applies to liberals. They're sons of bitches."
Yeah,
And
and that's
and
what
and
RFK Jr. faced.
yeah, that's surely what RFK Jr. feels. And after 4 years, and I'm taking it back to 2020, of them calling him anti-vax conspiracy theorist. I mean, look what it says about him on Wikipedia. And when you type up his name into Google, they called him an anti-Semite, all kinds of names, all kinds of smears and aspersions. So then he runs for office as an independent because, to quote Ronald Reagan, right, he didn't leave the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party left him. And then he asks for security protection on the campaign trail because because of the assassination of his father, Grace, all right, in June 1968. All right. His father was assassinated by Sirhan. And you talk about a life-changing event for RFK Jr. I mean, he's a teenage boy when this happened. So because of that, a law is put into place that political candidates running for the presidency get Secret Service protection. So he's a serious third-party candidate, probably the most serious third-party candidate since John Anderson in 1980, the Reagan-Carter campaign. He's clearly polling pretty well, right? I mean, at one point, it looked like he could get maybe 10, 12% of the vote.
Well, and kind of off of that, I think what's really interesting, especially just coming off of all of our Reagan talks, is he was a pretty unifying candidate where, for example, he's
Right.
a Democrat, he holds Democrat positions. I don't agree with him on everything, but I respect the guy and always have. And a lot of people share that sentiment where, I'm a conservative, but I've always respected him and what he was doing in this race for that reason, because it was clear that he wasn't playing those far left political games, and he does clearly care about the country. That's been evident from the beginning, and
Right.
he thinks for himself, which is also evident from all of the positions he holds, the way that he's conducted his campaign, the fact that he was willing to talk to the other side, debate, and something that he said, he basically explained that his father and uncle loved open debate and
Yeah.
that they would be completely ashamed of today's Democratic Party
Right.
and their captured partners in the press. And what was interesting, as RFK Jr. was speaking and saying this and calling out the media and saying what happened, as you were saying, the Democratic Party left him. As he's saying what happened, CNN, of course, cuts away from him proving the entire point.
Right, right. And his family, especially his sister Carrie Kennedy, have been just vicious. This is a total betrayal of my father and uncle. No, it's not. Learn the history of your own family, okay? Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the family, John F. Kennedy is supposed to be RFK Jr.'s famous uncle, right, president. His father, Robert F. Kennedy, they cross party lines all the time, okay? RFK Sr., and I quote Chris Matthews, other people on this talking about his common enemy, liberals. He said liberals are in love with death, was the phrase that he used. He supported Eisenhower in 1956. He and his brother and his father all supported Richard Nixon, the Republican, in his California Senate campaign against Helen Gahagan Douglas, the Democrat. They gave money, they donated to Nixon's campaign. And then get this, liberals, all right? Joe McCarthy, who for you guys is one of the greatest villains in American history, right? The evil Joe McCarthy. Robert F. Kennedy Sr. worked for Joe McCarthy, adored Joe McCarthy, all right? And I quote in the article, when McCarthy died, RFK Sr. shut down the office, flew out to Wisconsin, sat at the graveside of McCarthy and wept. Loved McCarthy. McCarthy dated one of the Kennedy girls. So McCarthy hung out at Hyannisport, the Kennedy compound, with RFK Sr., with JFK. So they have this history of independence. They were never partisan hacks. The Kennedy family today, you got a D next to your name, they're voting for you. You have an R next to your name, they're voting against you. So Kerry Kennedy and the others, I'm sorry, and I know this sounds kind of maybe pompous coming from someone who's not a Kennedy. You don't know your own family's political history. You don't. And who are you to say I'm a Kennedy? I'm telling you, well, okay, maybe you know your family better personally than I do, but the political history, you're so biased politically that your partisan leanings are kind of clouding your memory and history of the family. RFK Jr. understands his father and his father's politics and ideology better than you do. And Kennedy, the senior Kennedy, he did not like liberals. I know you guys claim him to be this liberal and all of this stuff. I could talk about this as a Reagan scholar. Reagan, by the time of 1967, 68, said that it sounded like RFK Sr. was starting to steal some of his speeches, plagiarize some of his speeches. He didn't use the word plagiarize, but he was very conservative, very anti-communist. They believed in lower taxes. They were culturally very conservative. They were pro-life on the abortion issue.
Yeah,
Ted
back
Kennedy was
when it was
pro-life
weird to
for a long
be
time.
back when it was weird to be a communist.
Yeah, yeah.
No longer.
So this is something. So for RFK Jr., and then to go back to how they demonized RFK Jr., anti-vax conspiracy theorist, anti-Semite, and then they refused to provide him with Secret Service protection.
And Trump was the one pushing for it, of all people. Trump
Right.
is the one that from the beginning has been saying he should have a security detail. Conservatives have been saying that.
He had multiple threats to his life. Now, the first piece that I wrote 2 or 3 pieces on this. I think one of them was maybe October 2023. I got an exclusive interview with RFK Jr., and he talked to us at the American Spectator. And we went through this whole thing. And one of the things that he told me, Grace, he said, I'm not so worried about myself and my personal safety, but I'm worried about the safety of my family and innocent bystanders, right, at campaign events and rallies. I'm worried that one of them could get hit by a bullet. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened at the Trump rally in Butler when this poor soul, Corey Comparatori, was killed by a bullet, all right? And then, I'll tell you, this really makes me angry. Only after all of that did the Biden administration finally give RFK Jr. Secret Service protection, okay? Only after that. And then these great proponents of democracy, we've got to save democracy. They filed lawsuits in every state to get RFK Jr. off the ballot, okay? So after all of this, All right. Then he comes out, RFK Jr., and guess what? He doesn't support the Democrats for president. And they have the audacity to
I'm
say, "Oh,
shocked.
you betrayer. Well, you're betraying our family values. You betrayer of democracy. You hater," right? What do you expect the guy to do? So then he goes, and by the way, he tried to meet with Kamala Harris. She wouldn't meet with him. Tries to meet with Trump. Trump does meet with him. So he endorses Trump. And now they're angry. How dare you people, right? How
Well, and the
dare
other
you?
You're so right, and the thing too, if anyone hasn't seen his speech, so the speech he gave when he ended up endorsing Donald Trump for president and exiting the race, I highly encourage you to watch it because the other thing that makes this so infuriating and crazy is what he said, right? So he tells this story of what happened to him. And as we kind of talked about at the beginning of the episode, he explains how, yes, the Democrats legally tried to get him off the ballot in every
Yeah,
state, squashing democracy, how this fight has just been so emotional for him, so difficult because of the Democrats.
right.
And if you listen to
His
what
own
he
party, his
said,
family's party.
oh, yeah, and if you listen to what he said, how can you have the reaction that his family, that Democrats did? It's absurd, and his family, I
What do they
mean,
want to
Kerry
be, a
Kennedy.
sap, a sucker, do all of that to him, then expect him to
Yeah,
endorse? Are you
it's
crazy?
crazy, and just to point to the magnitude of
What would
this.
his dad think of that? His dad would say, "You coward,"
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's absurd, and to point to the magnitude of this, I'll read part of Kerry Kennedy's statement because it
Oh,
was so absurd, horrible, and my reaction to this initially, was, "Who does she think she is?" She thinks way too highly of herself, and this kind of goes back to your other Kennedy comment maybe, but she does think way too highly of herself to think that anyone cares what she thinks or what she would have to say
she's
about
a
this.
partisan hack. So,
Yes, and
so, so it's
it's absolutely
strictly
absurd.
Democrat. That's right. It's all that matters to her. All that matters to her is
Well, and I understand
the Democrat. All that matters.
politics
All
and
that matters.
political families are messy, but can you not, I mean, to air out your dirty laundry like that, to feel that you have to make a statement
Right.
publicly, like people care what you think, to bash your family member like that,
No
that says a
class.
lot about character. That's really a problem, and what she said, and we'll put it on the screen too, but at
It
least
shows her
one of
highest priority, which is the party. Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
which
Party
speaks
uber
for
alles,
itself.
party above all. Right.
Yeah, and imagine reacting to this speech from RFK Jr., which a lot of people agree was great and one of the best political speeches in recent history. She says, I'm outraged and disgusted by my brother's gaudy and obscene embrace of Donald Trump, and I completely get out and separate and disassociate myself from Robert Kennedy Jr. in this fragrant an inexplicable effort to desecrate and trample and set fire to my father's memory.
Oh, hey, Carrie, your family drove him to that position. Could you please take some responsibility? Your party stuck him with a knife so many times. I, why can't you blame your party a little bit for this? Why? Because it's party first. And
Well,
your father was not that way,
no,
period.
and the fact that she would publicly make a statement like that, I mean,
Oh,
imagine, I understand we don't know these people, it's politics, but imagine
right.
these are people like you're putting a statement out like that about your family
Mhm.
member. That's just crazy. It's normal nowadays, I feel like that people would do stuff like that, but it shouldn't be. It's just completely absurd. And something else that RFK Jr. said in his speech, which just is a perfect contrast to the way that his family handled his speech, was he said, ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
Yeah,
Now,
amen.
which is a perfect picture of what RFK Jr. did. He crossed over the line. He talked to the other side and
Right.
he was willing to be humble and to step back and address, his audience, his followers, the people who have been loyal to him all this time in a very vulnerable and genuine way, explaining his positions that they haven't changed, but that he's been able to find this common ground. And he pointed out as well that, yeah, Kamala Harris was basically created out of nothing, that she's
Right.
a media hack, and that she hasn't done any of the debating. She hasn't had to present her policy, and he was appalled by that.
You know,
His
pause on that
father would be
point.
appalled by that.
Yeah, so again, these great champions of democracy, right? Kamala Harris. So I remember, right, doing a whole bunch of media interviews around June, July, and people said, do you think Biden will drop out of the race? Said, I don't know if he will or not. Well, professor, you're a professor of political science. Tell us, what will happen if Biden drops out before the convention? I said, oh, well, then you're going to have an actual convention, because then they'll have to get together. Biden has all the delegates. They'll have to debate. I put my money on someone like Newsom or Whitmer, not on Kamala Harris. I mean, everybody hates her. No one can work for her. She came in last in 2020 when she was running. They're not going to turn to Harris. But either way, it'll be great because it'll be a real convention, truly like smoke-filled rooms, right? None of that. And they just coronated her, right? Anointed her, and she went in and got the. And meanwhile, Robert F. Kennedy, from the Kennedy family, knows the history of the party. He's thinking, that's not how this is done, right?
No.
But I guess Kerry and everybody's like, what's how we do it today? You don't like it, you betrayer. And also, this is very interesting right now. So after they spent a year trying to get RFK Jr. off the ballot in each state, all right, now that the polling numbers are showing that the five-way race is actually, with Kennedy in, actually helps Kamala Harris more than Trump, okay? Now, Grace, Kennedy's trying to pull his name off the ballot in some of these states, and the Democrats are filing lawsuits to keep his name on the
Oh,
ballot.
yeah, they've so
It's just
that's and
unbelievable.
this is what completely
It's not your
exposes the
name.
corruption.
We'll decide whether or not your name's on the ballot, whether it's on or whether it's off. And now
Yeah,
it's staying on. It's amazing.
that's exactly what happened.
And Kerry says, you betrayer. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
amazing.
exactly what happened.
This is one of the
Now
craziest things I've seen in
it
politics.
is. I mean, the past 2 months have been the craziest months of politics. I don't know if ever, but I mean, at least in my lifetime, probably ever. It's been the craziest chain of events, and this is the kind of thing that drives me crazy, that can happen, like, where he's sued and sued to get off the ballot
Yeah.
by the Democrats. Then the second that politically it doesn't benefit them anymore, now they will not take his name off the ballot.
Right,
There are
right.
all sorts of statements from people in those different states,
Yeah.
claiming that he can't be legally taken off the ballot. So the fact that
They just
that
love
flip-flop can
democracy,
happen,
Grace.
I
They
know,
just love
exactly,
democracy.
they just love
They just
democracy,
love
it's the best,
democracy.
and Donald Trump's
Yeah,
a threat to democracy,
right.
conservatives are a threat to
Hitler.
democracy. Yeah, is, as they say, literally Hitler, that is what
Right.
they've said. So it's absurd, and this is what's frustrating to me, that that's allowed to stand for some reason, that people don't take that and immediately understand that that's disqualifying and a problem. Crazy. But RFK Jr., what he directly said about Kamala Harris in the DNC when this happened, he said, and I quote, "The DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for VP Harris based on nothing. No
Right.
policies,
Right.
no interviews, no
No
debates,
interviews.
only smoke and mirrors." And now she's done one
It's true.
interview, which we could call a fake interview. She
Oh,
spoke
yeah.
for 16 minutes, edited with friendly media. And my question is, okay, first of all, too little, too late. She went for about 40 days without doing any media
Yeah.
interviews, no press conferences. And even in this sit down interview, she did not answer policy questions. The American people deserve to know what they are voting for. And that's completely absurd, shouldn't be allowed, should be immediately disqualifying. But for whatever reason, people are still supporting her. And because of that media surge that's been completely manufactured, the left is just propping her up on that pedestal, and they've made that okay. They've made that normal now, where she doesn't have to say what she's going to do. She doesn't have to answer for her policies, which is absurd. It's like any job interview. She should have to be interviewed for the job that she's taking. It's basic stuff that we
Yeah.
shouldn't have to talk about. This should not even be a conversation that we're having right now, because it's so obvious, right? She's
Yeah.
running for the most important job in our country, and she can't talk about what she's going to do, what she's been doing. Trump, on the other hand, does multiple
Oh
interviews a
yeah,
day,
yeah.
has been this
The
entire
media
time.
should love that
No
about him.
notes.
Right. Good.
Exactly. He's a completely open book, no notes,
And
and he talks about this job without anything because he knows it. He knows what he's doing. He's qualified. He it's exactly how you should be when you're running for president. But
if
this contrast is just incredible.
if Dana Bash of CNN wanted to do a 6-hour live interview with Donald Trump, he would do it, right?
Oh, he would.
And with Kamala, it's pre-recorded. She brings her security blanket, Tim Walz, along with her, and and also I mean, they're not letting her interview because she's not likable. I mean, this is going to be like 2020 as much as they can with a Biden basement campaign, right? That's the goal. And they're hoping, to borrow from Bill Maher, that the Democrats would vote for a severed head in a in a blue jar over Donald Trump, and they will. So
And
they're
that's what's so crazy.
yeah, they will. They'll vote for anybody over Trump, and that's, Trump's ceiling, as I've said, I've always felt is about 46%. Now, a few weeks ago, he was at 49, but now he's like 47, maybe getting 48. I mean, it's going to be like a 47-48 contest. And by the way, if it ends up with Kamala 48 and Trump 47, Trump wins. He'll win the Electoral College with that. But it's going to be a very tight race. And right now, there's only about 1 to 2% separating them. But she's not likable. She's not popular. She's hard left. She doesn't have good policies. So they're going to protect her and keep her away from cameras and rallies as much as they possibly can. And to bring it
Yeah.
back to RFK Jr., he knows it and he doesn't like it. His sister and his family, they could care less. They could care less. It's the D, the Democratic Party. That's what they're most dedicated to, the preservation of that.
Yeah, and it's completely unprecedented too. I mean, think about the times that we're living in where that is normal and okay and allowed and can allow this race to even be this close. One of the things I've thought about a lot is, yes, I'm concerned about this election, but on a much bigger scale, I'm far more concerned for what this current presidential race tells us about where we are as a country. The fact that Trump and Kamala Harris are even polling so closely together, that this is such a close race that it's possible for her to win, even given all of this, given no policy positions from her that are clear, no interviews, no media, no accomplishments really. Like there's not she doesn't have accomplishments that stand out that make her overly qualified for this position. I and many others would argue the contrary. I mean, her record on the border is enough to show that that should be completely disqualifying. A candidate that thinks that it's not a crime to cross our border illegally, that should be immediately disqualifying alone. And that's not even to mention all of her other policies and other problems that would come alongside a Kamala Harris presidency. But again, the fact that it is this close of a race, what that means is that with the American public being in the position it is, that she even has as much support as she does, that a pretty openly Marxist candidate has so much support behind her, that tells us a lot about where we're going to be in 5, 10 years, what my children in the future are going to be living in, what my future family is going to be living in. That's what I'm concerned about. How much longer can America stand if this is the direction that we're headed in? Not even if it's just where we are right now, but it's not going anywhere good if this is the state that we're in right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll just wrap up by bringing it full circle back to RFK Jr., right? And that's his concern. That's what he said in that speech. That's what he's been saying since. And so now, I mean, he released recently the photograph, right? In fact, it was Nicole Shanahan, his VP of, and this really frosted the Kennedy family and Democrats. But there's RFK and JFK together, and then in the next frame below, right underneath RFK Sr., there's RFK Jr. and Donald Trump. And that really got to them. But they should be, again, if they're angry about this and what he's doing, they have themselves to blame. And it's so typical of them to never take responsibility. You can't treat and vilify somebody like you did RFK Jr. for the last 4 years, and then expect him to come crawling on his knees, groveling like some little puppy, right? Licking and he doesn't
Yeah.
do that. His
He's
father
not
didn't
gonna
do
fall in
that.
line.
His uncle didn't do that. That's right. He's his own man, and which is what we would like people to be, supposedly, in this country. But then again, for some people, maybe not.
Yeah, and that says it all. And thank you everyone for joining us this week. Hopefully by next week there'll be better news and people will learn to stand on their own feet and think for themselves. But obviously that's not going to happen in politics. But it's been such a pleasure being with you this week. Make sure that you go to spectator.org for more. Like, subscribe, share this with your friends to stay up to date with all of the latest episodes of the Weekend Spectator. See you next weekend.
Thanks, Grace, and see you all next week, everybody. Bye-bye.